Welcome to Monday on Pagan Perspective. Annie here. Our topic this week is dating and religion. And the question came from Risari, sorry I'm probably not saying that right, who said her husband and her have different religious views. Doesn't cause any problems, but she's wondering if we date people who don't share our beliefs or we're married to somebody who practices differently, what kind of challenges or chances for growth does that provide us? If we're single, do we look for a certain religious persuasion when dating? She thought it would be interesting to hear everyone's thoughts on this, and she also mentioned it would be doubly awesome if we could include our significant others, if we have one, in the discussion as well. Well, no, my husband and I don't share the same religion. We do share the same core beliefs, the things that we cherish the most about family, the safety, the safe haven of home, trust, the power of love, the power of our friends that we surround ourselves with. Those things we both feel the same about. Now, they're deeply held spiritual beliefs, regardless of the fact that we have very different religions. I asked Roger about this, and the thing that I loved about what his answer was is he didn't even see why this would be a pagan perspective topic. So God has blessed him, not knowing with what we pagan folk have often gone through in our search for partners. I haven't had a lot of problem. Let me start by saying I've never had a pagan partner. Yeah, and ideally I would like, if I could have made it happen, manifested it, probably would have liked to have had the experience of being with someone of very like mind. But when I look back over the length of my life though, I would have manifested something that in the end didn't matter. I've never had a situation where I had problems because of my beliefs being what the world considers to be alternative. And the reason is I've only ever been attracted to men and women who have an open mind. But the important part of it to me was the openness, the intellectual ability, the spiritual ability to grasp that we all have our way of being in the world, and the importances are relating at an energetic level. Acceptances of each other's differences and celebrating what we have in common. So my friends all fall in that category. I have never dated someone that didn't fall into the same category. So I've never had the problem of being accepted in spite of what is perceived of as my differences. Oh, there were a couple of instances that in the early process of dating somebody I realized that they were attracted to what they thought was something exotic. And there were those who wanted very much to be open-minded, but were more concerned about what others might think. It wasn't what they were thinking, but what they thought others would think. Well, those relationships didn't make it either. The relationships that ended up meaning something for me in my life, the partners that I've had in my life, were all people who just had an openness of spirit. So I didn't run into non-acceptance by my partners, because if that had been in their makeup to begin with, if they weren't universalists at some level to begin with, I wouldn't be spending time with them, I wouldn't date them. It did limit the dating pool, not because I am pagan necessarily, but even by being a Unitarian Universalist. Anything that was non-traditional. It limited who I would want to spend time with, and indeed who would want to spend time with me. And we all know in the dating world, it's hard to find good people to spend time with. Or at least that's my experience of it. You have to just experience a lot of different personalities and decide then who are you comfortable with. My comfort level has always been with those who are accepting of the differences amongst people. The differences person to person, and glorying in the things that we find that we have in common. So I've not had a problem. In fact, I'm going to say that because I've lived my faith openly for most of my adult life. Especially thinking of the last time that I was single, which I was in my late 40s then. It actually helped. It was a wonderful winnowing process to remove from consideration for future dates people that I'd go out with once or twice and just realize they weren't at that place that I wanted a friend to be, to enjoy spending time with them. The place of spiritual openness to the fact that there are so many different ways of being in this world. So in a way it helped me winnow out those that early on In other words, not go to the length of a deep involvement with somebody, of being in love with someone, and then having this come up as a stumbling block. But since I have always been very open about it, I asked Roger, and he said that it wasn't too long into our relationship that I explained to him a little bit about my beliefs. And in fact, it was probably before we met in person, because we did meet online. And the danger of that, of course, as I'm sure many of you well know, is if someone finds out that you're Wiccan, they start Googling it, and there's very few really good representations of who we are as a religion, as a spirituality out there. But once again, the winnowing system, I call it, kicks in. Because Roger then had questions he wanted to ask me. He didn't bear any resentment or I'm not comfortable with, or kept things to himself and then wondered about me. He asked me questions. I don't remember it ever being a big deal. And at this point in our lives, after 6.5 or so years together, he knows a lot about what I believe in and who I am, and he can correct others. He corrects the TV all the time when there's misspoken things about us on the TV, and he just has a good knowledge of who we are and what we do and why. It's not his thing. It's never going to be his thing. He's Christian. It's a very different spiritual set of beliefs than mine are. But the things that matter the most that I mentioned earlier, we have those in common. He accepts me. He knows it's part of me. He knows it's part of why I am who I am. How I behave, what I do, how I act, how I am as a wife, all has to do with my spirituality. And I have to reverse that and say, when I have been with people over the years that were of different paths and faiths of mine, the same thing. I look at how their faith has impacted who they were, what kind of person they are, and did it come out of their spiritual beliefs, and I could raise up a lot of respect then for their beliefs and who they were spiritually. Yes, it is an interesting topic. And I guess for me, the most important thing about it is, in my life when I started being much more open about my religion in a more public way, that, yeah, it put some people off. But the people that it put off were people I had no business having in my life to begin with. I would never consider, at this point in my life, and really for the last 10 years or so, never consider being with or around someone who had a problem with who I was spiritually. Because if they're having a problem with that, they're having a problem directly with who I am as a woman, as a person. And that is something I could not tolerate, absolutely could not tolerate. I've always been a bit picky of who I surround myself with. It wasn't always comfortable in my early years. But it became more and more comfortable as I realized that I wasn't particularly looking for a pagan partner. I was looking for a partner with open mind and open heart, and someone I could meet at a certain spiritual and intellectual level. And that has worked well for me. Someone could not deal with who I was as woman and witch. They really didn't have a role to play in my life. That's the part that being with or being around others who practice differently has played in my life. I wish you mirth and reverence. Merry part.